love brought you to Bali. And then when you got to Bali, what did you do? Like, were you already doing yoga? Like, what was the journey into yoga like? How did you get to where you are today?
It wasn't actually love as in a romantic love that brought me to Bali. It was the love of Bali, I guess. But I made my transition from the corporate world and all of that, and I was still living in France. I moved from Toulouse out to the west coast to Biarritz, which is basically the surf mecca of France, with in a certain way a similar vibe to Bali, I guess. And I did my teacher training. I did it with the Yoga Institute of Mumbai, they have an ashram in the north of Thailand, north of Chiang Mai. Beautiful place. And I did my teacher training there. And then I opened a very small yoga studio in Biarritz. And that's how I started it. And then what happened was that I was traveling to Bali at one point. I was stopping in India. I was in India in Mysore, which is where Ashtanga yoga comes from. And I actually went there to learn Ashtanga yoga. And then spending a month in Mysore, in India, and then traveling to Bali. And when I got to Bali, I was going to go down and spend time on the Bukit out in Uluwatu because I had a friend living there. And I had a girlfriend joining me as well. And she's a good surfer. And so while we were down there, the friend who lives there, he said, you should go and try out Canggu. It's this place where it's kind of like a new vibe where everyone wants to go there and it's kind of hipster. He said that this was, I mean, back then there was not a lot of people here. So he already felt that way. He's left Bali since, I can tell you. But we just traveled up to Canggu and it was mainly rice fields. It was amazing. It was rice fields. Well, you know, this must have been end of 2014. There was like a few Western places. Crate was there. Betel Nut was there. Deos obviously was one of the first things that opened up out there. So you could get your good coffee if you wanted to, you know. But then there was obviously the Varoons. You would eat your nasi champur and all of that. And we were staying at a hotel down on Echo Beach so that my friend could surf at Echo. Samadhi, where I'm still teaching today, was just on this street. And there was just by hazard, someone told me to go there and said, oh, you just came from Mysore. Well, at Samadhi, they have Mysore yoga. You should go and try it out. And then that was a big love in itself. But I was also actually teaching yoga at the hotel where I was living because they found out that I was a yoga teacher. And they said, we have this lovely space up on the roof. And it was rainy season, so there was not a lot of people anyway. And they were like, would you be like, if we have people asking about yoga, would you be able to do it? And, you know, we'll pay you 100,000 per person or something. And I was like, well, that will pay my lunch. So yeah, why not, you know? So while I was there, I did that. And then when I was leaving, going back home, like planned, they said, if you come back, we'll love to like have you on somehow. And even maybe have like daily classes, who knows, whatever. And I got back and I was thinking to myself, you know, that dream that existed since years ago about, oh, imagine different life. Maybe this is the time, you know? And you know how it is when you go on holiday and you have all these like new ideas and then you go back home and quite quickly you go back into the old routine and it's so easy to just, it becomes a memory. And I knew this. I was like, if I don't act now, I'll probably end up not doing it. There was a couple of other funny things that happened. When you go with the flow and then things align up. This woman, American woman who'd lived for 10 years in Bali, arrived in Biarritz. She'd met a Frenchman, fallen in love and whatnot. And she hears about me because in Biarritz, there was this one cafe that was like a proper American cafe with the big cups and the muffins and all of that, that we all loved to go to. It was called Milwaukee. And so when this American lady arrives and sees this place, of course, that's where she goes. And tells her story and they go, oh, you should meet Charlotte. Charlotte's just been to Bali and she's talking about how she wants to go back and teach, you know. So she contacts me and she's like, I can give you some good contacts in Bali and I can take over your studio here. And she gave me this one contact that's been one of my best friends ever since and who got me a job when I got here, Saffron, that you've met. It was like, you know how we're talking about, you know, worst case scenarios and find the solutions and all of that, find your network. your safety nets and all of that. Well, that was one where it was just like, okay, I've got this one name, you know. I didn't know if it was actually going to give something, but it was one name. You can hang yourself a little bit to that, you know. And it took me about 2 months to just fix everything, you know, sell my car. I was renting a room somewhere. So that was quite easy to get rid of, and just get rid of all my stuff, saying to people that maybe I'll be back in 6 months. That was over 5 years ago. and yeah, and by March I had, you know, arrived here with my backpack, my yoga mat, my hat.
When did you go back to the south of France before that?
I was here end of 2014. I traveled back on New Year's Eve. I spent January and February in France just dealing with everything. And then by March I had moved here.
Wow.
And then I moved here not knowing really what would happen. I had this gig at that hotel, kind of, you know, randomly, if people would want to do yoga. And then I had this contact, this one person, right, that I met up with, who'd been living here for a while already. So she had some ideas already, and she managed to get me some teaching. And then from that, I just basically took anything I could get. So I would just be like, anyone needed a yoga teacher? I was like, yep, I'm here. At one point, people would be like, oh yeah, that's that yoga teacher girl. Oh, this was back when there was not 100,000 yoga teachers around.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
so earlier we were talking about, like, you do one thing and everything just falls into place. Like, you came here and that was a big step, but you had no idea that you were going to move here, right? And you felt like, okay, well, if I go back right now, I know I'm going to likely fall into what normal life is, and this could just stay a dream. But
Yeah.
I do have a deep desire within me to live like this for real, in my real life, right? And as soon as, like, it sounds like this lady was like one of the big things that just kind of showed up in your life as like a hint or a nudge from the universe. And all of a sudden, right, every barrier just kind of melted away. Sold your car, to someone took over your studio, your apartments, and you created like a virtual safety net of like, I might be back in 6 months.
Yeah,
Right? So
exactly.
you had that there just as emotional padding. And then when you got here, you had your backpack, your hat, your yoga mat probably, and you're like, hey guys, I'm here.
Yeah, I'm like, so what's happening?
So what was that like? So when you got here, you had your classes, you went to the warungs. Warungs, by the way, for people listening, are local places to eat Indonesian food. And nasi campur is basically rice with different types of sides and proteins to go along with it, which is amazing. And I think I might have today.
Yeah. Well, you know, I would eat nasi campur morning, lunch, and evening because it was the cheapest option. Yeah. And it's good. It was like the cheapest option.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like if I had had several students in a class, for instance, I would treat myself to an expensive coffee, like a flat white, that would be basically the same price of my lunch.
Right.
Because, well, yeah, flat white would be from Crate would be 25,000 back then. And well, at the local Varung, that's basically, well, let's say 30,000 you would pay for a meal.
Yeah, like $2 US dollars. Crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I felt like, okay, I've done a good job today, I had 5 people coming to class, then I'm gonna have a coffee, you know, and I might even get some cake, because otherwise I was paying very low rent, and it was all that. Like, the thing is, once again, priority. I was definitely stepping down from a certain comfort that I would have had back in the corporate world in Toulouse, where, for instance, I would, you know, go out and have a bottle of wine with some tapas 3 times a week, no problem, because, you know, I didn't have anything more interesting to do anyway. And all of a sudden, I was living this very simple life, and it would be a big thing to actually get myself a nice cup of coffee. And you know what? You adapt very quickly into it. We're adaptable people. I mean, we see that in everyday life anyway, right? In both good and bad.
Looks what's happening right now.
Exactly. It is always, and it's going to sound like a cliche, but it's always on the other side of fear where things happen. Because what stops us in all of this is fear. And it's really when we take the jump, out there, that's when things start to happen and we learn about ourselves and all of that. And the thing is, it's always going to sound like a cliche as long as you don't actually do it, because you can't relate to it.
Yeah. And for some people who are fearful of going from tapas and bottles of wine and happy hours and all of this, right, to having to count your rupiah, right? Having to be mindful of the coffee that you buy every day. Like that's fear for some people. It seems like for you, that transition from that life to this life, especially, I mean, especially in the beginning, right, of getting grounded in this new life, like it was worth it to you.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. What's it been like since?
Well, so since then, everything has just evolved in this really interesting way. All right. I'd say that I haven't really had any real setbacks, or maybe it's just because I'm perceiving things differently today that I don't see it as setbacks. But I feel that I have been much more aligning with what feels right, and therefore making choices as well that goes in the right direction for me. So I have evolved as a person very much. There's a lot of stuff on a personal level that just like hit me in the face here in Bali that I had to learn the hard way, like the tough love kind of thing, but that made me grow. And the thing is, what I've realized that the beauty in that is that all these imperfections that I had, still have obviously, but that I had and that I learned lessons from, have enriched my work so much. Because after all, and I'm sure you can relate to what I'm saying now, what we do as a professional in what we do is also a way to heal ourselves. And I think that's when you encounter people who do things from the heart, and you can feel that they're doing things from the heart. It's because they're doing this. It's not random that we end up being a life coach, for instance, or being a yoga teacher or something. If it's coming from the heart, because it's a seeking of healing. It needs to be personal for it to really work, right? For it to stick with us, for us to evolve with it. And so I find that a lot of the stuff, the issues that I've had with myself, still have working on, has enriched my yoga teachings so much more. And so therefore it helped me to kind of ride on that wave as well, to then, wow, okay, and that allowed me to now do this, and now I can do this. And then I get this like people saying to me, you helped me with this and that. Oh, did I? Oh, yes, because simply I'm coming from a place where I know who I am, and this is what I do for me to heal. And I'm just sharing it with you in a certain way. I'm just being very vulnerable, allowing oneself to be vulnerable in front of people. And then they feel it, and then they feel that it's true, and then it works. And then you step up to the next level, and then all of a sudden, and then people start talking about you, and they're like, oh yeah, I heard about you. I hear that you do good stuff or whatever, And so it's really been, and there's been setbacks. As I said, I just perceive them maybe differently, which means that I allowed for them to teach me something instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. You were on this path of being you, right? Like you're caught up with yourself.
Yeah.
Is what I'm hearing. And when you are allowing yourself to be where you are, you serve other people in a more truthful, authentic, vulnerable way. It gives people value, it gives people healing when they see that you are living true to where you are right now.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I can attest to that, right? When I first started taking classes with you, I was also in a transition of my own. You being truthful, like you living your truth and sharing what's true for you, helped me. It had me looking forward to go into your classes, and it wasn't just about yoga. right? It was about being in a space that was true. It felt like
Yeah.
this is real. This is real for me. This is real for you. This is real for everybody else. And a byproduct of me going to yoga, I was like, oh, I'm better at yoga now. And that wasn't ever my goal. That was never my goal, is to go to yoga to get better at yoga for some odd reason. It was, and I realized that I was even more flexible. I was strong. I was doing poses that I never thought I would, but I was going because there was something deeper that it served within me that you were providing me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. What's interesting is that you came into my life at a time as well that was challenging to me, because I had just started teaching at a new place, and a place that I chose maybe not for the right reasons. And so it ended up being a painful experience. I mean, there was a lot of enriching in it, but there was a lot of pain in it as well, in that experience. But it brought me some of the best people that have been such important people in my life, like you, for instance, you know. And so it's always this, like, there's always the, like they say, like, there's always a silver lining in anything, right? And it comes down to, how do you choose to perceive it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Not every negative experience that we have is a loss, right? We can gain so much
Yeah,
from friction, from the challenges, even if it isn't so apparent.
yeah. I mean, it would be easy if it was apparent.
Yeah. I actually don't have like a fully mature thought on this, but something was coming up when you were saying, like, I decided for the wrong reasons in choosing this place to work. I have a question about, like, there was something um, within you that maybe in retrospect was maybe for the wrong reasons, but maybe there was some inner wisdom or something coming from you that um, you gained a lot also, not
Yeah,
not for the main reason of work and vocation, but
yeah,
another reason that does enrich your life in another way.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because once, like, I think we learn through contrast, right? We need to experience contrast, like we were saying earlier anyway. You need to hit rock bottom, etc. But you need to experience also what you don't like, in order to start to, first of all, make a more clear view of what you do like, and then therefore also begin to appreciate maybe other things. It gave me some good ideas of what maybe my core values are as well.
What are they?
Well, I think one of my core values is honesty, and another one is respect. And, or I would even say, instead of saying respect, I would say responsibility. And I find that if there's situations in life where it can feel really difficult to take responsibility for our own actions, and it can feel difficult to be honest. But if we can try to stay with it, even if it's scary, it means that we need to be very vulnerable, tapping into shame kind of feelings as well, putting yourself out there. Well, the thing is, when we do it, it makes us feel better about ourselves. And then we feel stronger about walking our path. And then all of a sudden, it brings us this new power. And I'm saying power, not in the sense of power of anything, but power inside of me to take action. And yeah, like I'm certain that there were people in my life there that I have encountered many times in my life before, not the physical person, but what they were representing. And I keep meeting these persons because I need to learn how to deal with them.
You're attracting these people into your life to teach you something, to learn from them.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's what's been happening here for you that you're noticing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can choose to see everyone that we meet as a teacher.
Yeah, I agree. Right. And it's so often that if we don't if we don't see that right away, if we don't see the value that someone can provide us, like what can you do for me? Like
Yeah.
we won't invest any of our time or attention into these people.
Yeah.
So you've been here in Bali for 5 years, but you've also lived, in the south of France, which is another paradise for a lot of people. What would you say has been that anchor for you, or has been that grounding, or what would you say is the motivation that has led you to live your life in this way?
Okay, this is going to sound maybe a little bit strange, but I think that I have this deep drive, and I think we all do, that knows exactly what it is that my life should be. And I'm not talking like material stuff. And I think that that has been my drive in this, where it feels just like this is the right thing. This is what, almost as if I would say, this is what I was imagining before I came into this world. So I think that it's been this almost every time when there's this new choice then, and it's like, ooh, okay, I'm tapping into something. This feels, yeah, I think, because I wouldn't be able to tell you that there's an anchor, that there's like, oh, if it wasn't like I've always had this person or it's always been this. No, I couldn't really say that. Of course, I mean, like, I guess maybe a lot of people, it always feels good to know that in a way I had family that was, loving me. But at the same time, there's a reason I moved away from my family. And I moved away as well because I feel like I have a better relationship with them when I'm far away, to be honest. And also they feel, my mother is the first one to let me know that I'm far away and I haven't called, enough and all of that. So that's a struggle as well. So I couldn't even say like, oh yeah, that's an anchor. Like my mother's always been there. Like in that sense. So no, I think that it's really this like personal drive, like where I've always felt like I need to live what is my life, what is going to be my life. And so I need to go in that direction. And it's this really strong drive, actually.
Where does it come from within you?
It's a gut feeling. That's all I can say.
So listening for what's true inside of you, inside of your real you, has led you to live your life in this way.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? Just came into memory right now. So I've always liked to write a lot. And when I was younger, I would write like stories and things like that. And then when I was in one point, when I had not changed anything yet in my life, I started to write again. I hadn't done it for a few years. And I always, since many years, been having this one, like I have my alter ego, if you will. It's this girl that I write about. Well, I haven't done that in years now, but I would. And her name was Ella, because for some reason it was my favorite name, Ella. And I hadn't changed anything in my life, yet I started to write about her and the changes that she was going through. She was leaving her boyfriend. She was doing this and that, like all these things. And she was living a life that was very similar to my own. A couple of years later, when I started to make my changes, I can't believe that I forgot about this. And I would just like stumble upon it again. And I'm like, oh my God, I was writing out everything that I was planning, let's say, to do. But I didn't realize I was like manifesting it. How weird.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how how it feels to flow more? There's more courage or adventure behind this alter ego. When we separate our identity from this fictional character, it just flows.
Yeah, because anything is possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So like, let's say anything is possible. What's next for you? Or what do you see the next 5 years or beyond?
That is a very good question. So I feel like I have something inside that I want to share. And I've started to little by little have a more concrete idea of what it is. And from time to time, like another piece of the puzzle comes in, but I can still be a little bit like vague about it. I want to bring this whole personal journey, the exploring the self through yoga, like I put it on my website, into experiences. And I don't want to call it retreats, because retreats have become such a analogy for holiday, and that's not what I'm talking about. Because I get great feedback from people who come to classes or who like follow on whatever. And then I'm like, okay, so these people, they're all like, oh, where can I get more of this? And so I want to create something around that. And it's not super clear. And the thing is, I actually kind of have a feeling that maybe it wouldn't happen in Bali. I don't know. But there's a side of what Bali has become. And when I'm saying Bali, I'm obviously talking about the Westerners coming here because they want a life-changing experience, kind of Bali. I'm not talking about the rest of it, which is actually much bigger and that hasn't changed so much. But I'm talking about this part where we are. There's some stuff that I feel maybe aren't so present anymore in wholesomeness and authenticity. And I'm not sure that it would feel comfortable to do this kind of project in that environment, in this environment. I'm not sure. Obviously, there's so many reasons why it would be a great thing to do it here. So I feel like I want to take what I'm doing a little bit further, making it into something more quality. Like it's still, I'm not saying that it's not quality now. It's the next step. It's the next leap to take. That's a little bit scary, because doing it maybe then fully on my own. Yeah.
Okay, so right now, you said you're doing something around self-image, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is the thing that you want to grow?
Yes, okay. I want to, because right now I'm working around self-image, and because I think that self-image is basically the base of all these things that we do, and because it comes from that perspective that we have, that we're finding hard to change because of the image that we have of ourselves. And this is done online at the moment. I have an online course called the Self-Image Project. And the idea then would be to take this into something bigger, longer, like a thing that people would actually sign up and come to a house out in the woods. There's no phones, there's no Wi-Fi, and we do this work.
That sounds amazing. It sounds like an incredible experience. For right now, you have a self-image project online. Like, what is that experience like for people?
Yeah, so the self-image project is a way for me to take this idea of, we have this idea of what yoga should be, and we go towards yoga because we've been taught that that's how, we can make ourselves feel better, right? And then we get into it, and then we have all these stuff that we experience where we're trying to do things right. And we might even end up making things worse for ourselves because we push ourselves, and then we need to look this way, and we need to do this, and we need to achieve a lot of things. And so by bringing the more psychological perspective into it, it's also to then say, hey, maybe we can start with who you are before we take it deeper into the rest of the yoga. And so what I've done is that I've made this course into 3 parts. The first part is, what is the mind? How does it function? Because by understanding the way the mind functions, we can realize that change isn't actually impossible. We have this idea that it's impossible to change, but that's because we don't know how to do it. And so I begin with just explaining like the ways of the mind, and then very much the function of the nervous system in there. That will then trigger, obviously, the fear response very easily for us. And then I kind of like just explain that first. And it's all very theoretical, and there's an exercise part to it in order to begin to kind of play around with that by oneself. And then there's a second part, which is, okay, now that I've gotten that, as an adult, what does this mean? And so then it means that, okay, so this function of the mind then has my mind play tricks on me as an adult and do all these things. And I've forgotten a lot because there's a lot of the subconscious in there that's just been like practiced and trained. And what is a belief, for instance, is one of the lessons in it. And then also, like we were saying earlier on, because we don't want to deal with pain, we then develop all these strategies around it that in psychology we would, for instance, call defense mechanisms, or more conscious ones, coping mechanisms as well. And so then I start to tap a little bit into that. So what is projection, for instance? So understanding the way the mind works, projection is then one of the tools. And so how do we use that? And then what are addictions actually? And why do we get addicted. And then we're addicted to so many things, mainly things that we don't realize we're addicted to, like just emotional states, for instance. And then once we've gone through that, and there's also a few ways of exercising around that. And then the third part is putting it into something more concrete. So then I'm like, okay, so because of the mind working that way, and you have all these ways around it, what is a really good thing to do is to create a routine for yourself in order to recondition what you've so, grained into yourself. And so then I give these routines that I would suggest to people to do and try to do them every day, and then implement in there a physical practice, which is then a yogic practice, a meditative practice, and then also a breathing exercise practice, because breath in itself has amazing effects on the reconditioning of the mind. Yeah, so basically that is what that whole project is all about.
Beautiful. So we can find that on your website.
Yes, you can find it on yogicha.com.
yogicha.com. I can also link it for everybody as well. I love that you're doing this. I know that when I had met with you the first time, I'm like, more people outside of Bali or outside of Canggu and outside of Bali need to have access to you. And this is a way for which people can have access to you, because I love your style, your energy, the way that you teach, the way that you show up, and the way that you are also a student. And you're constantly a student. So, and you're teaching from that perspective, which is super refreshing, and I really enjoy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe for people who are wishing to live their life outside of their current normal, what piece of advice would you give to people who desire to create a new reality for themselves or a new life for themselves?
I would say that begin by creating space for yourself. So by that, I mean, for instance, if you do have this desire, then it might be that in that desire, there's an idea of what a different life would look like. It might not be very concrete, but it might just be a feeling. It might just be images of things. So if you can start with creating a space for yourself, let's say every morning, 15 minutes, where you would actually dedicate that time just to you and this idea. And that idea, and the thing might just be to sit on your own and listen to something, music or whatever, that inspires you in this. For instance, just to make like a link to it, one of the things that I did was that I had, before I really I had started a little bit to move around things, but I'd gone to Ibiza to visit a friend who was living there, and I bought this bracelet. I made this bracelet my reminder of what it was that I was going to do. But I would have this reminder whenever I felt a little bit of a low, whenever I felt like this is never going to happen. I looked at it and I was like, no, I remember. I've made this decision for myself. I'm going to do this. And it might seem like nothing, because you could also be like, well, maybe you'll just have that as a reminder for the next 10 years, Fair enough. But the thing is, what you're doing is that you're starting to create these neural pathways, right, of a new idea. And then the more you trigger them, the stronger they become, until it becomes actually a belief inside of you. So this is what I'm saying with creating that space for yourself, where you have maybe a few minutes every day, where you sit down, you focus on this, whether don't ask yourself to produce anything. Just let yourself be with this desire, so that you begin to cultivate it, that it becomes something that you become accustomed to. And then it becomes just this natural thing that it's part of your life. Because what you'll notice after a while is that you start to speak about it to other people. And that's super important, because when you start to speak about it, you've created a symbol. There's like this imaginary, it's already existing. And then you'll kind of go towards that naturally. Yeah, that would be my advice. Create a small space for yourself for that.
I love that. Yeah. And I guess to tie it back to what we were saying in the beginning, it's just like, how do you evolve if you're in this shape? How do you possibly change your shape? And like, this is a beautiful way in which like you can do that, right? It's slowly but surely, no expectations, no attachments, just opening this question up for yourself, or this thought, or this idea. That's a beautiful piece of advice. Well, thanks so much. It's been such a pleasure to connect with you. I'm glad that we were able to do this, and that more and more people are going to be able to connect with you and your beautiful energy. I appreciate you so much, and I'm so glad that we're friends and that that we can do this.
Thank you. I've really had such a wonderful time. Like, I can't believe we're being here for like, what, 2 hours soon? And it's been so nice. And you're such a wonderful person. I'm so happy to have had the opportunity to participate with you in this. And I'm really excited what this is going to become. I mean, outside of just our conversation. So yeah, thank you.